Hello and welcome back to the Clicks to Customers podcast. This is John, your host and the CEO of Stub Group. For those of you who are just tuning in for the first time, Stub Group's a digital advertising agency, and we help clients dominate Google Ads and other advertising platforms. And as part of that, we get to meet all sorts of really neat businesses and people. And I love to seek out conversations for this podcast with people who have information and services that I think would be really applicable to you, to small, medium, large size businesses who are looking to grow, scale, and get more profitable. So without further ado, today we're joined by Paul Kleen from PitchIt. Paul, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you, my man. It's great to meet you again.
Absolutely. So the first time we met and kind of what got this conversation started is a client of ours here on the agency side of things is piloting actually PitchIt right now. And I've gotten some firsthand insights into that. And what I've seen so far, I've been very impressed. And so I said, hey, I want to have a conversation with Paul, get more of my questions answered, and most importantly, share the news with our audience about PitchIt, and I think it could be a very relevant service for some of those watching. So, Paul, could you describe what is PitchIt? What do you guys do?
Yeah, so we train AI agents to use voice and text-based methods of communicating with leads in order to qualify them on behalf of the business that's hiring PitchIt, right, to deploy those AI agents. And so from a consumer's point of view, right, let's role play. If you want to buy a phone or an internet service, right, then you're going to probably fill out a form or click an ad or call in, right? And that business is going to have to reply to you pretty quickly through a lot of channels to get a couple questions asked and answered and then qualify you, right? That process historically has been manual labor. And so PitchIt provides a labor-free option for businesses when they have those particular use cases happening somewhere early in their funnel.
And that speed of response is so critical too. I mean, there's so many studies out there showing that people expect response ASAP when they either fill out a form or make a phone call, and every minute you go with not responding to that, your conversion chances decrease significantly. And so that's one of the things I love about PitchIt in conjunction, like you said, with just saving manual time. So let's kind of start from the basics and work our way through them for those who are just kind of understanding this concept for the first time. So let's say I'm a business and I am generating form submissions. We'll start with forms and then let's go to phone calls. We'll start with forms. Yeah, so those form submissions could come through my website. They could come through things like Facebook lead ads, basically just people filling out a form for some reason, requesting more information. What's kind of the next step? What does PitchIt do with those form submissions?
Yeah, so we've got integrations with 7,000 different applications right now, as well as direct ones with Meta, so Facebook and IG. Those are big for lead ads at least. So the first thing we'll do obviously is just try to extract that lead from one of those applications and then pull it into our system. And that way we know who it is that we're contacting. So I'd say that's definitely step one, make that integration, and then it'll seamlessly make its way into PitchIt. That tells PitchIt to add it to a specific workflow. If you're doing form fills, then we provide an out-of-the-box workflow where a business can say, this is our SLA. Here's an example, right? So for every lead that fills out the form, within 5 seconds, we need to make the first call. If they don't pick up, I want 7 more attempts, right? They can do up to 10 in PitchIt. That's the max, up to 10 attempts. And I want to turn on email, text, WhatsApp, and calling. And so it would basically be 10 attempts through 4 different channels. And then they would tell us the time frame. So no more than 2 attempts per day and 3.5 days in total, right? And so that's basically what our system asks when you're making the workflow in your settings. How many attempts, how many days, how many attempts per day, and then which channels do you want us to use? And then we take over that outreach. So the AI will figure out what to say and then have those active conversations completely hands-free. Any replies that you get, any callbacks that you get, it'll handle those as well.
I think this is a really, really important for people to understand who are watching this is we're not just talking about like facilitating and making it easier for a human on your sales team to place a call back. This is literally AI placing that phone call to the person who filled out the lead with, no manual input on your end, per call. Obviously, you got to set things up initially, but you're not dialing that number. You're not talking to that person. I think a lot of people are going to be like, well, AI is cool, but like how does that work? How does AI talk to somebody? Can you kind of get into that side of things?
Yeah, and I think the other confusion that they might get is that they're already doing this, and I assure you that they're not. Most of them will have like a Go High Level, a HubSpot, a Salesforce, or even just, most call systems allow for leave behind messaging, like thanks for filling out the form, we'll call you soon, right? And so those aren't artificially intelligent in any way. Everybody gets the same comment, right? And so if we're thinking about how does AI know what to say, there's various levels that we have had to train the AI agent on. And most of it's around the context of what is the actual job that you're helping augment here. And so we've had to train at least our framework to behave like an SDR. That's basically your job, right? You're not trying to do customer service here. You're trying to get a hold of someone, extract a few pieces of information from them, make sure that it fits your team's criteria. So go and fetch the criteria on the back end. If that's like an API, if it's like a series of Q&A rules, and if it's a fit, then transfer them to the human in the loop. And so that's basically the job it's being given, and how it figures out what to say is not totally dependent on what the lead in this case is replying. We do have some capabilities with that context, telling them what's missing and what they should be trying to extract. And so there's a couple layers that we go through. We use agentic RAG, right? That's like a new term. RAG was the first term everyone heard of. Agentic RAG is the new one. And that's not really a term that everyone needs to memorize. The concept is pretty straightforward. If you've got a lead and the first thing you have to do is get a hold of them, right? Well, that's one agent's job, is to figure out which channels and what workflow and when to call. Our AI can figure that out pretty easily, well enough done, right? Reinforced machine learning can figure out best times and days to call and best channels and look at past data and get better over time. That seems pretty logical. A human would do the same thing. But then after they're connected, you got to ask questions, right? And so based on what the person is saying, we have another agent who's designed to go and fetch the right answer based on what they're saying. And we really split that into 3 different sections. So what's missing that you need? What did they say? And what does that mean? And then overall, what's the temperature? Is this like a cold conversation? It's just kind of going nowhere. Is it warm, but there's some, concern that you've got to clear up? Okay, we'll go clear that concern up. Or is it super hot and maybe it's time for the AI to kind of let go and hand it to the human? That is overall, I'm very high level talking about this here, but that's how our system figures out what to say.
I will not pretend to understand all the nuances of what you're doing on the back end, but yes, on a high level, that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of the voice side of things, when someone receives a call from the AI or they place a call that's answered by the AI, how does that voice work, and what are the options for a business to have control over kind of the voice that's used, the accent, the gender, things like that?
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of out of the box stuff. I'm not usually a huge fan of those, though. They do generally tend to be voice actors. Nothing necessarily wrong with it, but it does kind of sound like a radio ad. And so the reply rates aren't as high in voice. Like we don't get through the pre-screen questionnaires when people use those voices as much. And so I do try to push them to like our house voice, which is really just my voice. If they don't want to give us one of their own, then I've basically sold my soul to the devil, and my voice is just like available anywhere, right? Coming to coming to the living room near you. And if they don't want that, which is preferred by me, I'd prefer people use their own. We do often ask them to have their best salesperson read a book for 5 minutes into like a mic, and then send us that audio recording. And you can get most of the engrams from a 5-minute conversation and then synthetically create almost any word in human language with it. And so it sounds exactly like that person, same exact mannerisms, same exact way of producing words. And it's extremely accurate. And since it only takes about 5 minutes time and a microphone, most of us have these things sitting around our house. The reality is there's no actual barrier to entry to create custom voices anymore and then send them to something like PitchIt to use it inside of our solution.
That's wild. That is.
It's crazy, man. Yeah.
So I'm sure I'm sure you probably get this question at least at times. A lot of people have in their mind the idea of AI hallucinating. They'll have been using ChatGPT and it comes up with something.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of address that question when it comes to specifically what communication that AI voice or even the texting side of things is going to communicate to a lead?
Yeah, this is a great one. So that's a buzzword. I'm going to break that buzzword down. Okay, so let's just talk about what that really is. It's a bug, right? It's a computer software bug, and people say it's hallucinating because they think using these words is going to help them raise a funding round or sound really smart. But you handle it the same way you handle a bug. If PitchIt has a new feature that comes out, right, and we roll it out to select few people in a beta who are good customers of ours, right, that generally like the new features, there's going to be bugs for probably 3 to 4 weeks, and we squash them. You send us the screenshot, we try to reproduce it. If we can reproduce it, we look at the errors that led to it, and then we fix that in the code. Hallucinating is the same thing, and it always ends up happening in the same areas in conversations, usually, right? At least that's what we're looking for when we reproduce it. So the way we fix something like that is you can definitely do it in training, right? And so with our shared client right now, they're just testing the voice agent and trying to make it fail. And then we're figuring out, why is it failing? Is it, not spelling something right? That's, a quote unquote hallucination. But the reality is that it's a bug. We've reproduced it pretty easily. At 1 and 2 times that you ask this question, it fails. So let's change the question, right? So like, here's a great example so that we're not talking about tech here, and instead we're talking about an experience I think everybody gets. If you're talking to a call center and y'all are from different parts of the world and they say, what's your address? And the way you pronounce 10313 Big Thicket Drive, right? That's, an address, that's my address, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of ways you could probably spell that word. And so the human at the call center is probably not going to know how to spell it 9 times out of 10 either. So they're probably going to ask you to spell it. And so then you're going to spell it. You're going to say B. Well, that might sound like a D or P. And so you got to be very specific. And you have these problems with human conversation too. And so of course you have them with AI, and they look like hallucinations because the output is going to say that you said Big Ticket Drive, but you actually said Big Thicket Drive. And so when we see these hallucinations, treat them like a bug, reproduce them, and then change the question. So say, can you spell your address for me? Instead of what's your address? And then they'll say 10313 Big Thicket Drive, B as in boy, I, G. And most people have gotten used to this. They'll do it. Yeah. And that solves the problem 95% of the time, and problem solved, because you're never going to get it 100% in natural language. Humans would struggle to understand what the person is saying as well. People will get frustrated and they'd hang up. I mean, you're not going to get 100%. And we've all been in conversations where back and forth it felt like the conversation had to be repeated multiple times, right? So I think that's a great example of how you can fix it in voice. Inside of text, you don't have the problem as frequently when it comes to spelling, understanding things, because it's all basically written out. So you don't have to guess on that kind of stuff. But you still have issues fetching the right answer to a reply. And so we were doing some sponsorship for the Tucker Carlson tour. That was one of our first people using PitchIt, one of the first businesses using PitchIt. And there were a bunch of messages going out, And the replies were super broad because the message being sent out through PitchIt was in general a pretty broad thing to say. And so we got a huge variety of Q&A back and forth, most of it being super angry because the people didn't want to be bothered with that particular message. And so PitchIt had to figure out what to say, right? And so what we decided was, at the end of the day with this particular client, the amount of hallucinations, the amount of bugs, it was going to be so high that it was a lot better to have our feature where we just mark it as unread if we don't know what to say, and we just don't say anything. And then a human in the loop can be tagged inside of our web app or tagged inside of the CRM to jump in and make the determination on if they want to say something or not, right? And in real life, 9 out of 10 times, that actually ended up being something like, oh, I love Tucker Carlson, thank you so much. Or, no, I hate him, stop talking to me, right? With like cuss words and things. And so, I mean, neither of those really demanded a reply of any kind, right? And so most of the time they didn't say anything at all, but it also stopped 100% of the bugs from saying something bizarre to that person in reply. Because the reality is that these LLMs were designed to give an answer no matter what. And so you have to stop that if you don't want it to hallucinate. And sometimes just not replying is the best way to stop hallucinations.
Yeah. You made a really good point too in terms of comparing this type of a service to humans who are doing it. And I think we often kind of hold AI to like, okay, we want 100% accuracy. Like it should always work. It should never fail. But the reality is, if we're comparing it to what we're replacing, which is humans are very far from 100% accurate. We do a lot of call tracking and recording for our clients. We actually have people who listen to those conversations, provide feedback. And there's just so many times where humans do a horrible job of answering the phone, having the conversation, like you said, mishearing things, etc. And so it's really not fair to say, well, if I'm going to use AI, it has to be 100% accurate. It's more of, okay, let's compare it to what you're doing right now. And generally speaking, we're probably going to be able to significantly improve upon what's happening right now, especially with response rates, immediately making phone calls, and things like that.
Yeah, when we did our beta before we launched PitchIt publicly, it was with a big dealer of T-Mobile. And at the time, we did not have the AI turned on because it was just too early. And we needed more data on how to handle conversations. And so they were just having people out of the Philippines handle all the answers. Mm-hmm. And then our system was facilitating storing all of the replies into threads to make it easy for the people to do that. And their SLA was that they had to get back to every reply in under 60 seconds, right? And the team assured them that the humans could do this. And what we found was 65% of those human-made replies took over 15 minutes for a reply. Wow. And at 1 minute, it was 95% failed to reply quickly, right? And so the humans fail almost 100% of the time when you give them complicated SLAs across 7 channels of comms, 24/7 inbound lead throughput at a scale like the one that our customer has. They're going to fail daily. And so if your AI can improve it, even in order of magnitude, right? You're taking something that is so flawed and making it much better than what it is today. Take the W, right? Right now, the technology is available. Don't wait for AGI, which may or may not ever come, right? Take the W now, implement it now. It's so much better than what your humans are doing for you. And the other thing we found was that the people that were doing this job before didn't even like this part of their job, didn't want it, thought of it as very much annoying and low paying and no real reward. And so it was hard to incentivize people to do it. And they weren't even good at it, but they also weren't incentivized well to do it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the idea of like, okay, I'm just going to call through, a bunch of numbers, try to do as fast as possible. A lot of people aren't going to answer the phone, and some of the ones who do aren't happy to speak with me. That's not a lot of fun for a human.
No.
Whereas it's like, no. I don't care. Let's go make it happen.
Yeah, we were working with a major telco carrier who has about 15 or 20,000 leads a quarter that they send from their sales force to master dealers. And they found out about a year later that those master dealers were just throwing those leads away, and they were shocked. But the reason is that all of those leads required pretty significant outbound legwork to qualify. Yeah. And that broker found it easier just to take their own inbound calls. And so they only did that, and they would never do the outbound dial. But that's like a perfect example of what I'm talking about, that it's extremely demoralizing to do this job manually. Even if you tried to do it, you probably would fail to get any results. And then they would stop doing it pretty soon thereafter until you just don't do it at all and throw the leads away, right? And a major telco, publicly traded, telco provider in the United States has this problem right now, right? So I think no matter what way you look at it, right, this is such a massive improvement over what they're doing today.
Absolutely. Speaking of scale, so obviously we talked about very large companies who are using this, publicly traded, etc. On the other side of that, is there a level where a company is too small to leverage something like PitchIt?
Not necessarily, right? So maybe at like an enterprise engagement level, that wouldn't make a lot of sense for, let's say, a dental practice or pro serve provider of really any kind, maybe like an e-commerce company. But that does not mean that there aren't lower level ways to engage with PitchIt on something like a $99 a month plan, right? And so let's talk about, I guess, the difference between an enterprise engagement where everything's custom and integrated and an out-of-the-box solution. So most of what we talked about today with custom voice, the workflow creation, the 7,000 integrations, right? I mean, that is available out of the box. In and outbound workflows can all be fully automated. What's maybe not available out of the box is custom pricing models, right? Where we have an invoice go out at the end of the month, net 30, based on how many sales we helped lead or how many leads we qualified, right? Maybe that's not something we do because SMBs just want a $99 plan and their volume's not super high. And so, they think of it as a really good AI IVR or like a really good AI receptionist or a really good AI SDR that they can use for, the 20 to 50 leads that they get a month. But they just want to provide really good customer experiences for those 20 to 50 leads, be always on, but not have like a full-time employee sitting around 99 out of 100 hours waiting, doing really nothing, right? And not having to outsource it to the Philippines, which is how a lot of them do it with virtual assistants today. And that's a bad customer experience, but it's affordable. So that's, the solution. The other one that they might do is they'll use like a call service, right? And again, there's nothing wrong with it. Like Ruby was excellent. We used to use Ruby at my past company. It's just old. It's an old way of providing that solution. And so I think SMBs out of the box can find companies like PitchIt can provide a lot of value for a very affordable monthly rate. And as long as they stop, short of trying to create custom solutions with that company, which definitely wouldn't pay back the time involved, they'll be set. I mean, if they send me 25,000 recordings and say, load these up and train us, a special AI agent around these calls, for an SMB, it'd be extremely accurate, but like, do you need that level of accuracy? Not likely, right? Maybe you're asking too much out of your AI if that's what you need, because there's no way it'll be worth the cost to implement something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing, going back to channels, I meant to ask you earlier and forgot, is for chat, like say Facebook Messenger or even a chat on a website. Is that something that you support as well?
Yeah, so definitely DMs, right? DMs on Facebook and Instagram. And then another one that's kind of sneaky is comments on ads. So the comments API is you get a tremendous amount of people that will they're lazy. They won't click the ad, they'll just comment or DM, and they aren't going to leave Facebook. Nothing wrong with it. It's just their way of communicating, right? And so we do integrate those into the inbox and then handle all the replies that would come with it. And then just like calls and text messages and emails and WhatsApp messages, we export all the data on the back end so that it can sync with CRMs and things. So there's not really a huge difference. The only part where we stopped short is we did have a live chat function, and that was through Meta. They had a really nice live chat framework. They shut it down with no warning 2 months ago. And so by the time that this recording goes live, we'll probably have the new live chat framework up. But there was like a 4-week downtime where we had to turn it off because Meta just shut it down. And they never really told anyone. I don't even know why they did it, but if you were using their live chat plugin on like a WordPress site or Squarespace or something, right? It stopped working about a month and a half ago, and they're never going to bring it back. And so we quickly found some other frameworks to work with. But it was just funny that you asked that question because we did have it for a year and a half and then lost it for a month.
That unfortunately sounds so much like Meta.
Yeah, it does, right?
I wish I were surprised, but it's like, yeah, no, that tracks.
Yeah, it does.
Well, Paul, I've learned a lot. Really appreciate your time today as we kind of start to wrap things up here. One question I like to ask guests is, are there questions that you wish that people were asking you about PitchIt or things in generally that they're not asking, that they should be asking?
Yeah, like the known unknowns, right?
Exactly.
I think that people should be asking questions. I'm happy you asked that timely about TCPA laws. That's such a huge critical change in consumer and business contact methods. And so a lot of contact centers, right? And you probably work with a lot in your business running ads. There are drastic changes happening in less than a month on where you can get your leads, what you have to get in terms of opt-in and consent from them. There's regulations around social media leads compared to web form leads, compared to inbound calls, compared to outbound calls. Do not call registration list is getting some updates. Robo-dialing loopholes are being closed. There's so many things changing on the 27th of January. And so I think people should be asking questions like that to their agency, to their contact center, to their affiliate marketers to make sure that they're ready. And there's still time, right? 4 weeks time. And so if anyone who's listening to this is worried about compliance and robo-dialing and how do I contact leads and not get sued? How do I buy a list from people? How do I purchase affiliate leads? Am I compliant, right? That's another thing they should be asking. There's a report that we'll be publishing on Forbes in January, which basically is our law firm's opinion around all of those use cases, what it was like before, what it's going to be like after. And so they should read that and just look at the use cases and figure out which of those they're doing, and then read what's changed. And we explain, if you're running Facebook ads, here's what's changed. Then just look at your Facebook ads, send that to your agency. They'll make the changes. And now you know you're compliant, right? Or at least you know that you're not negligent and that you've done some homework to try to become compliant, cut your risk down a little bit, right? And so I think that's definitely the biggest question, that when it comes to AI and contacting and sales, right? That's a huge one to be asking, and very timely right now, at least.
That makes perfect sense. I will be eagerly watching for that release on Forbes in January.
Yep.
Get my hands on that.
Yep. You'll get it. I'll send it to you.
Cool. Well, Paul, thank you so much. Where is the best place for people to go to learn more about you and reach out about hiring PitchIt?
Yeah. Go to PitchIt.ai.
Awesome. Easy enough. PitchIt.ai. For those watching, listening, I highly recommend you check out Paul's company. I'm really impressed by what I'm seeing so far there, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for many businesses to improve their customer experience, improve their sales approach using tools like this. So, Paul, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, my man.
Let's catch up later.
Nice to see you. Cheers.
Take care.